In the late 90s, the Malyshev plant started work on a new Ukrainian SPAA. The result was the ZRAK Dонець, which was first shown at the Max 99 exhibition in 1999. The raised T-80 hull, together with a ZSU-23-4 turret, definitely results in a rather odd appearance. Originally, the vehicle was intended for export, particularly to countries like Pakistan, which had purchased about 300 T-80s only a few years prior. The idea was to offer a cheap alternative to systems such as the Tunguska. The change in hull to one of the T-80UD had a few advantages. Due to a lighter turret being mounted, the weight of the system was reduced to 35 tons, and together with a 1000 horsepower engine, it would result in a power-to-rate ratio of 28 horsepower per ton, which is double that of the original Shilka. This, combined with its reduced ground pressure and higher torque engine, would be perfect for the Pakistani environment. However, the increased weight and reduced range could pose some problems. The more spacious hull also allowed an increase in ammunition from 2,000 to 4,000 rounds. Typically, a Shilka Modernization will use manpads, such as the ZSU-M4, which uses 9K310 Igla missiles. However, the Donets came with 4 9M333 missiles, which you probably know from the Strela. This is a significant improvement, as the 9M came with a 3-channel seeker compared to a single channel on the 9K, which resulted in improved flare resistance. In addition, the heavier warhead of 5 kg compared to 1 kg on the 9K meant a proximity fuse detonation mechanism was used instead of a contact one, which would improve hit probability. One downside was that the 9M was about 20% slower than the 9K. Also, a few years later, the M4 would receive the 9K338, which would bring it close to 9M, but the 9M would still be better. Electronics also received a total overhaul, including a new digital fire control system with improved tracking, an upgraded radar, and a bunch of other stuff like a navigation system and data transmission system. While it is more capable than the Biala or the M4, it still falls far behind the Tunguska. Using a T-80UD hull made very little sense. A T-55 hull could carry all the upgrades at a far lower cost, and an MTLB hull could carry all the upgrades minus the ammo capacity, and some extra effort would be needed to mount the additional equipment needed for the 9M missiles. The hull had contact 5 ERA, but the turret was still lightly protected. Any hit to the hull would result in shell fragments and ERA plates being sent flying into the turret, disabling or potentially destroying the vehicle. Even if ERA was to be removed, the fragmentation would still be a problem. I actually covered this sort of issue in a previous video where I talk about barrel vulnerability to nearby heat explosions, so I definitely recommend you watch that to get an idea of how vulnerable the turret would be. The turret of the tank is typically the first thing to be fired at, so it being left weakly armoured further diminishes any potential benefits of the T-80 hull protection. I have seen some people online say this is great for part standardization for countries that field T-80s, but countries buying from Ukraine usually already have T-55s and MTLBs, and even if they don't, the additional complexity of the T-80 hull maintenance compared to that of a T-55 or MTLB probably outweighs any benefits from part standardization. It's mentioned that a T-55 can serve as the basis, so well, why not just make a prototype on a T-55 hull, which would make much more sense? Why build a mediocre AA on a super expensive T-80 hull, which would require international buyers to give up one of their expensive modern T-80s to be turned into an SPAA? Unsurprisingly, the program failed. Perhaps if it was primarily marketed on a T-55 or MTLB chassis, it could have been a promising budget SPAA, but the idea of mounting a mediocre weapon system on a super expensive T-80 hull was doomed from the start.